Well, I guess we're live. I'm trying to determine how I can go about seeing what's going on, seeing your questions and all of those kinds of things, because today I'm actually going to be making use of my whiteboards. And I've got a bunch of things written down, so that means I can't be in selfie mode on my phone. It means we have to have it in the reverse mode. So I'm hoping I'll be able to take note of the fact that you've got questions, and if not, if I have to run over to my computer just for a couple of seconds, that's what we're going to do. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Danielle, and I help female leaders pivot from anxious to zenful without medication through one-on-one coaching. And today what I want to talk about is how people-pleasing, which is typically rooted in trauma, how that has a negative effect on our income, and also what are some of the ways that we can start to redirect that energy so that we can start to live a more deeply meaningful life, and one that is more aligned to, well, who we want to be and how we want to live our lives. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is to let you know, full disclosure, I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a psychologist. My degrees are in, believe it or not, hearing and audiology, and in partially finished degree in psychology and sociology way back many years ago. I had decided I wanted to be a psychiatrist. It's something that I seem to be very good at. People want to tell me their things that are going on with them, and I always seem to give great advice. But back then my big issue was that I didn't really take my own advice. So to give you a little bit about me, I have come from a very traumatic filled life. At the time when I was at Laurier doing my psychology and sociology, I had actually just left an abusive marriage. I was 22 years old, and if it weren't for friends stepping in, I would not have left, because the damage that had been done in childhood to my self-esteem and to my beliefs about myself, the damage that he furthered that allowed him to actually physically abuse me, those were things that, well, at that time I couldn't see myself being able to help anybody else if I couldn't help myself. So fast forward 30 years and 30 years of leading and coaching and mentoring multidiscipline teams, developing training programs for major retailers across the country in my business as a key account manager at Mattel, as well as developing training programs both in manual form as well as delivering them in person in one-to-one workshops, large groups. I also developed an online learning portal for my team in my last position. So training is something that is very near and dear to my heart, and also I hope you will say is something that I'm decent at. So today we're going to talk about how being anxious and being a people pleaser actually limits your income. So who here would like to earn more money? I think probably anybody who's watching is raising their hand. We all want to earn money. And why is that? Because, well, the world that we live in does require us to trade currency for the goods and services that we want. So having more income is certainly going to help us to achieve some of those more visceral goals and dreams, those more physical ones that include accumulation of material goods. However, one of the things that holds us back is this need to people please. And I call it a need because we don't naturally people please. Something has happened that has actually led us to a people pleasing persona. In my case, it was constant criticism from my mother. My mother was both physically, verbally, and psychologically abusive. Oh, so I guess that's three things, not two. But she was physically abusive. She was also verbally abusive and psychologically abusive. And honestly, that continued until I finally decided that I needed to remove her from my life because she couldn't respect the boundaries that I was putting up. That only happened last year. So 52 years of dealing with that and the negative impact on self-esteem. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what some of the traumas are that we experience as children that can lead to these behaviors and why that is. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was kind of a very short list of traumatic experiences that many of us encounter growing up. Of course, verbal abuse is the most common. It's just something that I think a lot of people just don't even put a lot of thought into, if I'm being perfectly honest. I would have carried some of those verbal messages that my mother gave me, that my first husband gave me, that previous employers have given me, friends have given me, all of those messages that told me that I wasn't good enough. I know for a fact that I passed those on to my children. I know for a fact that I've said those to my children, and we've done some work on that, around how to redirect that energy, how to refocus their sense of self in more positive ways as a result of that. So there's healing work to be done there as well. But let's talk about it in terms of business. When we've been in situations of abuse, whether it is verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, whether it's bullying at school, any of those forms of abuse, and sometimes even just being a third party to abuse. In the case of divorce, quite often parents will have those horrible fights, those knock down, drag them out fights in front of their children. And what often happens is children internalize those things that are said. And of course, we all know that children often believe that they're the cause of divorce, even though we know they aren't. But it leaves a lasting impact. So if I were to ask you right now to kind of sit and just think, some of us know our traumas and some of us don't. Sometimes it's a passing remark from a boss that just bit at the wrong time. We woke up in a mood, and that's not traumatic per se, but in some way it has shaped our self-esteem. So I'm going to give you just a moment to think, what are some of the events that have happened in my life that have shaped who I have become? And I would like you to think of it in this context. Most often when people have experienced abuse in their lives, they internalize that and then they bring it back out again in ways that you may or may not expect. We think of a lot of abused people becoming bullies or becoming abusers themselves, whether it's hurting their children or their spouse, bullying in the schoolyard. My husband has many stories about being bullied, and then he became the bully in his teen years because he was just tired of taking it anymore. Of course, once he recognized it, he did the work. Well, he's doing the work now even. But on the flip side of that, on the flip side of being abused and having those aggressive reactions are in fact the passive reactions. So things like anxiety, perfectionism, and of course, people-pleasing. And you may not think that you are a people pleaser, but I'm going to read a few ideas for you, and I want you to tell me if you say yes to any of these. I love my put a finger down challenges. So, do you ever say yes when you actually meant to say no? When you actually wished you had said no, when you wanted to say no, and for some reason the word that came out of your mouth was yes, sure, okay, whatever the positive affirming verbiage was that you used. When you really wanted to say, nope, no thanks, not interested, did you say, sure, tell me more? Yes, I'd love to know more. Yes, I'd love to join you. Yes, I'll be there. Yes, I'll do that work for you. Any of those. How about apologizing for things you're not actually responsible for? Being Canadian, of course, bad habit, I do that all the time. But what about you? Do you apologize for things that you're actually not responsible for? Do you tend to suppress your own feelings, particularly the negative ones, anger, sadness, and other negative emotions? Do you suppress those just to save everyone else around you having to experience those? And I don't mean this in a, I'm just going to leave my emotions at the door because that's the professional thing to do and I need to carry on with my day. I'm talking more along the lines of, oh, I wouldn't want them to know that I disagree with that. I wouldn't want them to know that I'm not in a good mood. When somebody asks you how you're feeling, do you go, fine, thanks, with a big smile on your face? Or do you actually say, actually, not so great today, Linda. Thanks for asking. So that's one other one. Not expressing your genuine thoughts. Of course, that falls right in line with that. How about being constantly concerned about what others think of you? Here I am doing a live video on Facebook, a social media platform that's available to, 7 billion, 8 billion people in the world. Was I nervous coming into it? Heck yes, I was nervous coming into it. I'm talking for the first time live on a topic that has deep meaning for me, that I haven't trained on in a few months. So of course I had some anxiousness about it, but my motto is do it afraid, so here I am. But what about being concerned about what others think? Do you let that stop you from doing things? That's an important question. Do you let it stop you? How about, here's one that most people don't think about. How about trying to help others even when they don't ask for help? Is that something that you do? How about feeling hurt when you believe that someone has criticized something that you've said or did? Do you have that reaction of, oh, pain, ouch? Are you afraid of making a fool of yourself? I know that a lot of people are nervous about doing live videos, for example, because they're afraid of making a fool of themselves. Do you flatter others? Especially when you are flattering people that you don't even dislike. That's not genuine. It's not authentic. And that is definitely a people-pleasing behavior. How about avoiding disagreement or conflict? How about wanting to seem perfect? How about being unwilling to acknowledge your own mistakes, admit your own mistakes in front of others? How about doing favors for other people? Whether you wanted to or not, whether you have time to or not. Perfect example in my previously people-pleasing days would be, oh, Danielle, I can't get this done. I just don't have time. I just don't understand the assignment. It's just too hard. You know what? Absolutely, Cecile. I'm making up names now. Absolutely, Cecile. Hand it over. I'll get that done for you because you know what? It's so critical to our whole team's success that it gets done. What I should have done was coach. What did I say her name was? Cecile. I should have coached Cecile how to find the time in her day. Being a people pleaser, I actually put that burden on myself instead. So that's another way. Taking on work of others. Taking on things and doing favors for others, even though you don't want to or don't have time. How about distancing yourself from certain people? Even if you're abused, sorry, not distancing. How about not distancing yourself? So a perfect example would be continuing to see my mother at every holiday, multiple occasions, and my late husband and my current husband both said to me, you know, you're different for a week before she comes. And I heard the words, but I never really let them sink in. So that's a people-pleasing behavior. She wanted to come. She wanted to see us. I didn't want her here, and yet I did it anyway. So that's definitely a people-pleasing behavior. So if you do that, even in your life, then you are likely a people pleaser. I don't think I did it often in business, but feeling unworthy of love and or respect. And as female leaders, respect tends to be more important to us. I've always been a heart-led leader, so a little bit of love and affection was always a good thing. But it was one of the ways that I knew that I was a people pleaser as well. And most important was how I would feel, how I would dwell on situations after they had taken place. Being in a circumstance, being in a situation, and it didn't quite go the way that I had hoped it would. Not for lack of careful planning, I promise you, because being full of anxiety and a perfectionist, I micromanaged my own thoughts and potential outcomes. Maybe you do that too. That's a different topic for a different day. But then afterward, I would sit and say to myself, oh, why did you say that? Oh my gosh, you knew that you didn't want to do it. Why did you take it on? And I would do this on a regular basis after just about every interaction. And as a leader who was managing 40 people, that would mean that I would often be doing that a minimum of 40 times a week. So if you are doing any of those things, let's talk now about how people pleasing will actually have a negative impact on your income. Well, for a start, what it's going to do is it's going to create more work for you, even though you don't have more hours in a day. Because typically, and this is what I did as well, we say we have 8 hours in a day. Some of us gave ourselves 12 hours in a day to do the job. And that has an impact on our family. That has an impact on the people that are in our world outside of the job. And so We all have to sleep sometime. I don't care if you sleep 3 hours a day or if you sleep 8 hours a day, you need to sleep sometime. So if you've got those 12 working hours plus the 3 to 8 hours, well, now that leaves you with a total of 4. Most of us who are people pleasers like to come home and make sure that the house is clean, that the meals are made, that the kids have received our love and affection for a little while. Perhaps we have a craft or a hobby that we're trying to work on, or a friend that we want to go and see. But we try to be all things to all people. And what inevitably will happen, of course, is that we start to feel unappreciated. We start to feel worn down, physically exhausted, absolutely emotionally drained from trying to give so much to others. The catch, though, of course, is that because we've not been honest about what we need, what we want, those others are not really giving back. Hopefully you've got at least one friend in your world, like I do, where she sees through my crap and calls me on it, and then reminds me that I can't be all things to all people, because even as far as I've come on this journey, of course, I still have those moments in time. That's pretty normal. You'll not get rid of them entirely. So people pleasing is more than just what we do at work. So now we've got this tightrope that we're trying to walk of home people that we need to please and work people that we need to please. And ultimately, which one do you think is going to give first? Which one are we going to let suffer? Which one are we going to sacrifice? Everybody will be a little bit different. In my case, I sacrificed my family in favor of the job. And I pushed harder and further and faster. But do you know what started happening? I started missing deadlines because I was overcommitting myself. 12 people wanted me all at the same time. And I was saying yes, 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 yes to all of them. And then trying to figure out how to fit all 12 in. How about when you say yes to work that you don't know how to do, you're not equipped to do, or you don't have the time to do? Well, now you create, of course, an image of unreliability. And that, of course, will mean that when it comes time to looking for a promotion, when it comes to, attracting your next ideal client, all of those different iterations of the future, once you don't have time, once you've, ruined your boss's perception of your ability to be reliable, to produce quality work, all of those things start to suffer. And what ends up happening is that in their mind, you're not the qualified, wonderful go-getter that they originally thought you were. So that has a negative impact on your income because, of course, you get poor annual reviews. You'll get passed over for promotions because you're just not quite there. You don't have the maturity yet. You don't have the experience yet. How about in those situations where you missed an opportunity because you were so busy that you missed the deadline to apply? Or how about being so busy trying to run your own business that you miss opportunities that come through because you didn't have the time to actually sit down and strategize, which is such a critical part of building a business, isn't it? So these are ways that it actually can influence your income. And of course, there's many, many more. And we would delve into those on a deep dive together if we were in a coaching session. But I wanted to make sure that I introduce one of the tools today that I use on a regular basis when I'm working with people one-on-one. Oh, excuse me while I reach. So what this is it's actually called the Emotional Culture Deck. And I've just pulled out 16 cards, positive and negative. And I want to go through a really quick exercise with you. I've got on these cards words, okay? So these words, as you're reading them, of course, you would say these are likely negative words, am I right? So, if you are a people pleaser, you have most likely felt each of these feelings at least once in the last week. So what I'd like to ask you to consider right now is, as I go through these words, pick 3. What are 3 that you don't want to feel? What are 3 of these words that make you feel really poorly, really negatively, and you don't want to feel them anymore? I want to say one thing on that, though. There's a caveat. Of course, there are going to be times when you feel it. We cannot control our instinctive reactions. We can control how we respond. So we're going to work on that together as well as we go along. But let's read out what these words are. Ironic, reactive. So if you can just take a couple of minutes and maybe get a pen and a paper, and I'm going to read through these words, and I want you to write down 3 of them that you have felt in the last week that you don't want to feel going forward. So I have felt them in the last week. Going forward, I don't want to feel these, even though I know there's a chance that I will, because nothing and no one is perfect. As Haley, my coach, would say, progress, not perfection. And I will mention, I am currently standing. I normally like to sit to do these, and I like to use my screens and my screen shares and all of that fun stuff. But my beautiful coach, Haley, challenged me to do a live standing up. I know I have a bit of a fidgeting problem, a bit of an energy problem where I like to be just a little bit too movie. I like to pace. So anyway, all right. I think that's enough time to have grabbed a pen and a paper. Are you ready to read through the words with me? So, as I go through the list, I want you to pick 3. Reactive. I don't want to feel this, but I felt it sometime in the last week. Going forward, I don't want to feel it anymore if I can avoid it. Reactive. Stuck. Similar, but different. Paralyzed. Ready? Inferior. We're trying to choose 3 words that we have felt in the last week, but don't want to feel going forward. Inferior. Doubt. And of course, if we were working one-on-one, we would talk about how doubt can be doubt of others, doubt of yourself, doubt of a system, doubt of all kinds of different things, but doubt. Doubt. I felt it in the last week, and I would really like to not feel it going forward. Incapable. Incapable. Hesitant. Who doesn't want to feel hesitant anymore? What about overwhelmed? Has anybody felt overwhelmed in the last week and would like to stop feeling overwhelmed going forward? Knowing, of course, that sometimes our schedule gets crammed up. We don't control the ebb and flow of what others are willing to do with and for us, right? So overwhelmed may continue, but if we could reduce or minimize that, wouldn't that be lovely? Of course, our topic for today and part of my I help female leaders pivot from anxious to zenful. So have you felt anxious in the last week and you'd like to stop feeling that going forward? How about embarrassed? How about afraid? And of course, there's many levels of fear, but afraid. And if you've been following me at all on my personal page or even here in the group, you may know that one of my favorite phrases is, and it's a hashtag, of course it's a hashtag, it's social media, guys, hashtag do it afraid. So afraid. Have you felt afraid in the last week and would like to minimize or eliminate feeling afraid going forward? How about controlled? Did you feel controlled in the last week and you'd like to reduce the amount of times you felt that way? And that's a really important one for people pleasers, isn't it? I know myself, I didn't feel like I had any control over my own reactions or how I handled things. I felt like it was always driven by how other people around me felt. So how about controlled? Intimidated. Have you felt intimidated in the last week, and is that something you'd like to work on? Powerless. As women, we often feel powerless simply because we're women. But if you could learn how to take your power back, wouldn't that be amazing? So powerless. Insecure. And last but not least, guarded. Okay, so as I say, these are only 16 out of, I think it's 38 cards of negative emotions. Now that you've taken those 3, when you look at that, and you think about the time in this past week that you felt that way, would anybody be open to putting in the comments what that situation was and how they felt that way? And while you do that, I'm going to jump over and see if I can find this and find the comments. Okay, so for me, the ones that I picked out this week: embarrassed, intimidated, and insecure. I also would have picked guarded for myself. So now I've got 4. I've got to break these down into something. Well, there you go. The one that needed to be taken out apparently removed itself. So the 3 that I've ended up with for this week were guarded, insecure, and embarrassed. So now it's story time, and I'm going to pick one of these. And I think I'm going to pick the embarrassed. I picked the embarrassed. So first, let's talk about what happened that I was embarrassed. I am involved in a number of different groups, and I made a comment on somebody's question post, and I guess I overstepped. And so they came to me and they told me that I had overstepped, and I got embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I had not used the emotional maturity and intelligence that I have to recognize that they weren't looking for that kind of advice. So did we not say earlier about how advice can be giving advice to others when they don't want it? So I was embarrassed. And so what did that cause me to do? It actually caused me to also feel guarded and insecure. So there you go. And that was really just one incident. Now, where I would go with you from there is that we would talk about more around that specific situation. We would talk more around when are other times that you felt that way. And we would talk about how do we know that that's coming. So the thing about changing patterns of behavior is that you have to know how to do it. And you may have seen as well that I've put up posts about having all of these wonderful affirmations coming across your Facebook feed and how great that is to see all these words of encouragement and positivity. But it can also create a little bit of a sense of shame if you're not quite there yet, and that feeling of, ooh, that comparison of how, oh, they're there already and I'm not. So everybody has their own journey. Everybody's going to take their own amount of time. Even when you feel negative emotions, there's an opportunity to improve them. There's an opportunity to change the pattern. And that's what you would do with me one-on-one, is we would work on ways to change the pattern. But what I think is most important, only because I don't have anybody on right now talking to what has been a situation for them. I can't deal with that particular situation in the moment, so that's okay. What I would like to offer you then instead is some steps on how to change being a people pleaser. And really these are steps that you can take to overcome a lot of these behaviors, even perfectionism, if you will. So I'm hoping that you're going to be able to see my board if I step away. How to change is what I want to talk about. And I'm hoping you can see that. Maybe I've got too much shadow. So step 1 in any pattern change is to be aware of it. So working with me one-on-one, what we would do is we would start each session with a retroactive look for about 10-15 minutes, retroactive look for the last week to 2 weeks, however long it's been since we spoke. Looking at the specific areas, times, and places where personal behaviors have come up that you didn't like and you'd like to change. And if we've been working on those ones in particular, then of course we would take some time to decode those, because awareness is the first step to changing. Awareness will always be the first step to changing. It doesn't matter whether you're an alcoholic, whether you're a perfectionist, whether you're a people pleaser, whether you're anxious, whether you get angry quickly. It doesn't matter what issue it is or what habit it is that you're trying to change. I was just going to say, including quitting smoking. The first step is awareness, right? Being aware of when you do it, how often you do it. What are the circumstances that are arising? Be aware of, oh, isn't that interesting? What are some of the things that are said just before you start to exhibit that behavior? So in the case of a person that wants to quit smoking, having done that myself, oh, that meal was awesome. Oh, I really need a cigarette now. So there are these triggers, right? Because the bad habit is, I shouldn't call it a bad habit. The negative behavior habit, the negative pattern, is also, it has its own hallmarks that it uses to take place. And so that's the thing, those are the things that we need to identify most. Saying, I'm a people pleaser, I'm anxious, I'm a perfectionist, great start. Identifying when it's happening, how often it's happening, what are the things that lead into it, that is the first step to changing the behavior, and that's something that I would help you to do through one-on-one coaching. In the meantime, though, here's your homework. If you've chosen 3 words, I want you to journal on those today. If you don't normally journal, just humor me. Journal on these. And then in a day or two, when you've had a chance to actually reflect on that journal, I'm hoping you'll come back and create a comment here on this live that says, homework done, sure. I realized this. I recognized that. Something that this has actually helped you to recognize. Adding language to negative emotions in particular is absolutely critical to changing those patterns and those behaviors. So I hope you found this helpful. And I know I didn't go into a whole lot about how it affects your income, but know that it does. We'll do this again another time perhaps, and we'll talk a little bit more about the direct impact on your income. For now, let's do that journaling. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a great day.